So I've been fixing stuff like this for quite some time now, and to be honest, I'm not bad at it, but I'm definitely not perfect either. Now, some of the viewers who are watching are a lot better at it than me, and were also nice enough to help me out, which is extremely kind of them. In this part of the repair, we're going to take the tips and advice I've been given and hopefully get this trimmer working again, and if you're one of them, I'd like to thank you in advance. In today's video, we look at this trimmer and the problem is that it's not running like it's supposed to. Basically, it starts and then eventually stops within a minute or less. Now, after the last video was posted, I was given a lot of advice on what I should do next by some very keen-eyed viewers, so I can't wait to see if their advice is going to help out. Now, I'm going to try and repair this trimmer, but yours might be a little different, so this might not work on yours. If things aren't working out for you, like in the video, please ask about it, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. In the last video, we found out that the carb was the issue, but before we took it apart, I replaced the fuel lines, and to be honest, I was running low on my supply of fuel lines, so I had to use some from a kit for a different trimmer. Now, some of the viewers noticed how loose the fuel line was and thought maybe there was an air leak at the port, which of course would cause poor fuel flow and eventually cause the engine to stop. Now, some of the other viewers also thought the fuel filter might have been the issue, which I can understand that. If the filter, which is a cheap aftermarket one, had an internal restriction, that could cause a fuel starvation issue as well. For those of you who aren't sure what that looks like, here's a clip of the trimmer starting and running and eventually starving for fuel. As you just heard, it really didn't have an issue starting, but once running, it soon starves for fuel and then stops. Now, when I was cleaning and inspecting the carb, everything went well. The screen was clean, it was also allowing fuel to pass through it, the pumping diaphragm was in great condition, and of course, I replaced the metering diaphragm, which was the only issue I found. But even after all that work, it still refuses to work correctly, even after making several adjustments to the fuel adjustment screws. So what's the plan this time? Well, here's the situation. What I plan on doing is taking off the carb, tearing it down, and cleaning it better than the first time. This includes taking out the needle and rocker arm assembly to confirm that it is indeed clean with no obstructions. Then I plan on removing both adjustment screws to clean out their passages, and finally I'm going to adjust the rocker arm. That way I can ensure more fuel is going to flow through the carb. So why didn't I do a more thorough cleaning in the first place? Well, that's a pretty simple answer. I didn't think it needed it. It's sort of like washing your car. You wash the outside with soap and water, but you may not necessarily vacuum the interior, and the reason is because at that moment, it wasn't all that dirty on the inside. That's the approach I take when it comes to cleaning a carb. If it's dirty, clean it. If it's filthy, take it apart and clean it really well. And if it's beyond repair, just replace it. Now, this particular carb, it really wasn't that dirty. It just needed a new diaphragm, and that was it. There's also another reason for picking and choosing how I clean a carb, and that's time. If it only needs a little bit of time to get it to work, that's how much time I put into it. If it's going to need a lot of work, then I'll put a lot more time into it. And if it's going to require too much time, then I just replace the carb. This one fell into the first category. Now, my advice when cleaning carbs is simple. Give it a go, and if it's still having issues, bail on the original carb and get an aftermarket one. This keeps me from having too many headaches and also allows me to keep my sanity. Now, if I followed my own advice, I would have just replaced this carb already. However, since I got so many good tips on this one, I figured I'd show you the results of all those tips. Now, it's not wanting to stay running, so I'm going to adjust the carb to deliver more fuel to the engine by turning the L screw a quarter turn counterclockwise. Unfortunately, things are not going well, so this time I'm going to turn both screws another quarter turn counterclockwise. I also forgot to mention this, but to deal with the loose fuel line on the port on the carb, I did put a wire band on it, making it a lot tighter and reducing the chance for an air leak. So before I start to get too frustrated tuning this carb, I'm going to let you know what happened for the next 10 or 20 minutes. I make more adjustments to it and things still don't get any better, and eventually I walk away from it for about an hour to go meditate because, I hate to tell you, this is not working out. I tried cleaning the carb again, fixed an air leak, and still nothing is working out. If you hadn't guessed what happens next, it should have been pretty obvious. Unfortunately, you can't save them all. So that means I resorted to buying a cheap aftermarket carb. This is what I should have done from the beginning. It would have saved me a lot of time and aggravation, which, to be honest, isn't very healthy. As you can see, after running the engine a few times, it's been able to get more fuel to flow through the carb, and it shows by how much fuel is now in the bulb versus before we got it running. Now, after getting the carb off the engine, I'm going to replace the gasket between the carb and the insulator, just in case there's an issue there, but to be honest, I'm just getting desperate and grasping at straws, and that's because I really don't think there's anything wrong with it, but since the kit came with one, I'm going to use it. I'm also going to replace the fuel lines because while I was ordering the new carb, I also ordered a few more parts, including more fuel line. I also plan on replacing the fuel filter with a better one. Unfortunately, I forgot to order more pull rope for a mower project, and you'll see that issue come up in a video here in a bit. Now, I really don't think there was an issue with that fuel filter, but like I said, I really want to get this one done and get it back to the owner. Now, if this was my trimmer, I'd replace the gasket, carb, fuel lines, and filter in separate events to isolate and find out which one of them was the cause for our issues, but unfortunately, I don't have the luxury of time when it comes to someone else's equipment. After the return line is installed into the tank, all we have to do is replace the gasket, slide the new carb onto the studs, and then replace the air filter base and filter, and then we'll be able to try and start this engine. So if I tell you the best choice is to just replace the carb and be on your way, then why do I even bother trying to clean them and replace the diaphragm? That's pretty easy, money. I don't know about you, but I don't have a money tree in my backyard, so if I can spend 10 minutes and replace a bulb and a diaphragm for less than $2, I think it's a better deal than buying a $16 carb kit. After getting the lines back on, I'm going to press the bulb a few times and see if fuel is going to flow through the lines like they're supposed to, and as you can see, it's doing exactly that, and of course the bulb is filling with plenty of fuel as well. Now, if yours isn't filling with any fuel, there could be an issue inside the carb. Also, if the fuel is coming up from the tank through the return line instead of the filter line, then you have your lines on backwards. Now, once everything is back on, we can finally try and start it. So that's all the testing I need to do, and the reason why is because it started the way it was supposed to, revved from idle perfectly, and sounds fantastic at wide open throttle. Yes, I could have tried to adjust it more, but to be honest, if it's working fine right out of the box, I really don't want to mess with it, otherwise you could get into more trouble than you bargained for. Another reason why the engine would have running issues that would cause it to eventually stop could be a leaking gasket, allowing air to get past the carb and into the engine. That leak would have to be minor while the engine was cold, but as it warms up, the leak would have to get worse when the metal parts start to expand. Now you could try to pressure test the engine and then replace the gasket that's leaking. So in the end, it turns out I wasn't able to save the original carb, and replacing it along with the fuel lines and filter helped to get this engine starting and running like new again. So my question is, would you have kept cleaning the carb for a third or even a fourth time before deciding to replace the carb? For me, one failed cleaning is more than enough for me to throw in the towel and get a new carb instead. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.